All right, Jim, let's try to scare people straight tonight. Hit them in the wallet. You get a DUI, and let's say it's bad, and you get convicted of it. What are the penalties? What are the costs, the time, all of that?
First thing, let's just talk about the penalties in South Carolina. On a DUI first, you're probably going to pay just a little over $1,000 for the punishment, the fine. You're going to have to go to the ADSAP school. In Georgia, it's called risk reduction class. May run you about anywhere from $400 to $800. You're going to have a substantial increase in insurance. Some insurance companies will actually cancel your policy and not just increase it. And you're going to now, after a law change in South Carolina this year, will be forced to put an ignition interlock device in your car for 6 months. That's going to run you about $1,000 to $1,200 for those 6 months. That's on a DUI first. When you go to a second or third, it's much worse, just like it is in Georgia.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks, Jim. We wanted to grab a quick call, and then we'll continue, because I know Vic wanted to jump in a lot more to that. Susan is on the line for us. Hi, Susan. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you guys?
Doing great.
Good. I just wanted to know, I live in South Carolina, and they do a lot of, checkpoints. I guess they're DUI checkpoints. And if I'm coming from a house where I just had one glass of wine, do I offer that information or just keep quiet and let them do their thing?
Perfect question.
I couldn't hear.
Oh, she said she went through a DUI checkpoint in South Carolina, and she just had one glass of wine. How should she respond to the officers when they stop her?
And so she went through a license check or roadblock.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and we see a lot of roadblocks in South Carolina. So this is what happens. You come through, there's no traffic violation, but our courts have allowed roadblocks to be utilized. The first thing the officer is always going to do is ask, have you been drinking? Because he smelled it on you. He'll usually come up and say, roll your window down. You don't have to. But you do have to provide your license, registration, and insurance. Some people will just crack the window and slide it on through. But the officer knows what that means, is you don't want to roll down the window and breathe on them. So, but either way, do you have to give him your documents and information? Yes, you do. Can he require you to get out of the car? Yes, for officer safety, if he thinks there is reasonable suspicion that you might be a drunk driver or something else might be illegal in the car, he can require you to get out. Other than that, he cannot require you to do anything. The first thing that he's going to do, if you've had that glass of wine, and he says he smells it on you, he's going to ask, have you been drinking tonight? You do not have to answer that question. You don't have to say, yes, I have. You don't have to say, no, I haven't. You can just refuse to answer the question. He's then going to get you out of the car and say, well, I can smell it on you. I just need to make sure that you're safe to drive home. I don't want you to get hurt. Will you be willing to do some field sobriety tests? Again, you do not have to do those tests. And I will tell you that I've never seen anybody pass one. I've never seen the officer say, you did them so well, better than I could do them, go home and have a good evening. I think the tests are failure design. They're primarily based on balance and equilibrium. They will say in the manual, if you're over 65 years of age, they're not effective. If you're more than 50 pounds overweight, they're not very effective. The first thing I'll ask you to do, there are three standard. One is the HGN test, which they'll run a pin back and forth across your eyes. I've never seen anybody pass that. They always say they saw nystagmus and that you failed. They then will ask you to do a walk and turn test and then ask you to do a one-leg stand test. If you do those tests, I've never seen the officer say you passed. I saw clues, and now I use that as my probable cause to arrest. Prior to those field sobriety tests, all I had was the odor of alcohol, or if you admitted you were drinking, your admission. I tell my clients, never admit that you were drinking. Let them prove it. don't make the case for the officer. Secondly, if you do the field sobriety test, you're going to fail them, and they're going to use that to buttress their claim that you were materially and appreciably impaired. The fact that you had something to drink and drove is not a crime in any state in this nation. They've got to prove you're materially and appreciably impaired. But if you don't do the field sobriety test, they're going to arrest you anyway. I've had in the last 3 months 4 DUIs where the officer asked if my client had been drinking. The client said yes. Asked if they do field sobriety test. They said no. And the officer said, well, sir, you can leave me no choice but to arrest you if you don't do the field sobriety test. And one officer said, it's your way of proving to me that you're not impaired. Well, you don't have to prove you're impaired. He's got to do that, and you don't have to prove you're not impaired. My advice is, if you've driven after you've been drinking and you think you might have had too much, and you haven't used one of these devices to test yourself, then give them as little evidence as possible. At that point, you're in damage control mode, and less is better. Don't admit anything. Make them prove their case and come to a good defense attorney, and we may be able to get you a good result or even an acquittal. But once the blue lights come on, once they get you out of the car, you need to be in defense mode and don't admit anything. You do not have to admit anything to the officer. Please don't.
Thank you, Jim.